I thought luck had been following me for years. The truth was far stranger. The day I discovered someone had secretly protected me for 7 years began like any other Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. Nothing unusual. Just a gray Boston morning with cold air drifting between office buildings and the smell of fresh coffee floating through crowded streets. I remember standing outside my apartment building, adjusting the strap of my bag and checking the time on my phone. 8:22 in the morning. I was already running 5 minutes late. Again. At 26 years old, my life looked ordinary from the outside. I worked as a project coordinator for a nonprofit organization downtown. I rented a small apartment. I paid my own bills. I worried about student loans and grocery prices and whether my aging car would survive another New England winter. Nothing about my life felt remarkable. In fact, if someone had asked me what made me special, I probably would have laughed and changed the subject. Yet looking back now, I realized something unusual had been happening for a very long time. I just never noticed the pattern. 7 years earlier, when I was 19, my father passed away unexpectedly. Losing him felt like watching the foundation of my world disappear overnight. He had been the kind of man who always knew how to fix things. Not just broken appliances or leaky faucets. He fixed fears, problems, doubts. Then one day he was simply gone. After that, life became harder than I expected. Money was tight. College seemed impossible. There were nights when I sat alone in my dorm room wondering whether I should quit and find a full-time job. Yet somehow, every time things became impossible, something happened. A scholarship appeared at the last minute. An internship opened unexpectedly. A landlord agreed to give me more time when I fell behind on rent. A hiring manager selected me over candidates with stronger resumes. At the time I called it luck. What else was I supposed to call it? The city bus arrived beside me with a hiss of brakes. I climbed aboard and found a seat near the window. Outside, Boston moved through its usual rhythm. People hurried toward offices carrying coffee cups. Delivery trucks stopped at intersections. Morning sunlight struggled to break through layers of gray clouds. Everything felt normal. By lunchtime, I had almost forgotten about the strange feeling that had followed me all morning. Then my phone rang. It was Olivia from Human Resources. "Emily, can you stop by the administration office before you leave today?" she asked. "Sure," I said. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all. We received a package for you." "A package?" I frowned. "From who?" There was a brief pause. "That is the strange part. There is no return address." The conversation ended a minute later. I thought little of it at the time. People received anonymous deliveries all the time. Flowers. Gifts. Promotional junk. The workday passed quickly. Meetings. Emails. Deadlines. By 5:30, most of the office had emptied. I walked upstairs to the administration department and found a small brown envelope waiting on the reception desk. My name was typed neatly across the front. No sender. No company logo. No explanation. Just Emily Parker. The envelope felt surprisingly light. I thanked Olivia and carried it home. That evening, rain tapped softly against my apartment window while I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope beneath the warm glow of a single lamp. Something about it felt important. Significant. Almost familiar. Finally, I opened it. Inside was an old photograph. And the moment I saw the man standing beside my father in that picture, my entire world began to change. For several seconds, I could only stare at the photograph. Rain continued to tap softly against the window behind me while the small lamp above the kitchen table cast a warm circle of light across the worn image. My father looked younger than I remembered. His smile was easy. Relaxed. The kind of smile he rarely wore in photographs because he was usually the one holding the camera. Standing beside him was a man I had never seen before. Tall. Dark suit. Serious expression. Even in an old photograph, There was something unmistakably confident about him. Someone had written a date on the back in faded blue ink. 7 years ago. My stomach tightened. That date mattered. 7 years ago was the same year everything in my life had begun changing. I turned the photograph over again. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. No clue about who had sent it. Just the picture. I reached for my phone and zoomed in on the stranger's face. The image quality was poor, but not poor enough to hide his features. Sharp jawline. Dark hair. Intense eyes. He looked familiar somehow. Not personally familiar. Publicly familiar. Like a face I had seen somewhere before. I opened my laptop and placed the photograph beside it. The rain outside grew heavier. Headlights passed across my apartment wall in brief flashes of white light. I typed several searches. Nothing. Then I focused on the man's face instead of his name. 10 minutes later, my heart nearly stopped. An article appeared on the screen. Then another. Then a third. The same face. Older now. More polished. Standing outside luxury hotels. Walking into charity galas. Speaking with politicians and business leaders. The name beneath every photo was the same. Lucas Moretti. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Even I knew that name. Everyone did. Some people called him a billionaire investor. Others called him a kingmaker. Depending on who was telling the story, he was either one of the most respected businessmen in the Northeast or one of the most mysterious men in America. Rumors followed him everywhere. Facts were much harder to find. My eyes moved from the computer screen back to the photograph. My father knew Lucas Moretti. Not casually. They were standing shoulder to shoulder. Comfortable. Familiar. I looked closer and noticed something I had missed before. My father had one hand resting lightly on Lucas's shoulder. It was the kind of gesture shared between friends. The realization made no sense. My father had never mentioned him. Not once. A sudden memory surfaced. I was 19, sitting in a hospital waiting room after my father's funeral arrangements had begun. Everything felt blurry back then. People came and went. Flowers arrived. Cards appeared. I barely remembered most of it. But now one detail returned with startling clarity. A large arrangement of white lilies had arrived without a name attached. My mother had assumed they came from a distant relative. At the time, nobody questioned it. Tonight, for the first time, I wondered if that had been a mistake. My phone buzzed unexpectedly against the table. The sound made me jump. A new email notification appeared on the screen. No subject line. No sender name. Just an unfamiliar address. My pulse quickened as I opened it. There was only one sentence inside. If you want answers, look inside the storage box your father left behind. Then, before I could read it again, the message disappeared. For nearly an hour, I sat frozen at the kitchen table staring at the empty inbox. The mysterious message had vanished so quickly that part of me wondered whether I had imagined it. Yet the photograph remained exactly where I had left it. My father, Lucas Moretti. Standing together 7 years ago. Real. Tangible. Impossible to ignore. Outside, rain continued to wash across the city while distant headlights drifted through the darkness below my apartment window. I looked toward the hallway closet where an old storage key hung on a small wooden hook. My father had rented a storage unit years before his death. After the funeral, my mother could not bring herself to go through everything. Neither could I. Life moved forward. The monthly payments continued automatically. The key remained untouched. Until tonight. The next morning arrived wrapped in low-gray clouds. I barely slept. By 8 o'clock, I was driving across the city with the photograph resting on the passenger seat beside me. Traffic crawled along wet streets. Coffee shops filled with commuters. Radio stations talked about weather forecasts and sports scores. The normal world continued around me while my thoughts remained trapped 7 years in the past. The storage facility stood near an industrial section of the city surrounded by warehouses and loading docks. Nothing about it looked remarkable. Rows of metal doors stretched beneath fluorescent lights. Security cameras watched every corner. I parked and walked inside carrying the old key. The manager greeted me politely and verified my identification before directing me toward the rear building. My footsteps echoed across concrete floors as I moved through narrow aisles lined with storage units. Finally, I stopped in front of Unit B214. My father's unit. For a moment, I simply stood there. The metal door looked exactly as it had years earlier. Dust coated the edges. The lock felt cold in my hand. Then I inserted the key and turned it. The mechanism clicked immediately. I lifted the door. Inside sat decades of memories. Old furniture. Boxes of books. Camping equipment. Family photographs. The familiar scent of cardboard and aging paper filled the air. I stepped inside slowly. At first, everything appeared ordinary. Then I noticed something unusual. On a shelf near the back wall sat a black document case. Unlike everything else in the unit, it looked new. Well maintained. Intentionally placed. My pulse quickened. I carried it to a folding table near the entrance and opened it carefully. Inside was a single folder. Across the front, someone had written my name. Emily Parker. My breath caught. The folder contained newspaper clippings, copies of school achievements, scholarship announcements, college acceptance letters, internship awards, and dozens of documents connected to different stages of my life. Every milestone was there. Every success. Every opportunity. The collection stretched back 7 years. I turned page after page in disbelief. Someone had been tracking my life. Not obsessively. Methodically. Carefully. Like a long-term project. Near the bottom of the folder rested a sealed envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The message was short. If you are reading this, then the promise has reached its end. At the bottom of the page was a signature. Lucas Moretti. And beneath the signature was an address. For nearly 10 minutes, I remained seated at the folding table inside the storage unit, staring at the address written beneath Lucas Moretti's signature. The sounds of the facility seemed distant now. Rolling carts. Closing doors. Footsteps echoing through concrete hallways. Everything faded into the background while one question repeated itself inside my mind. Why? Why would a man like Lucas Moretti spend 7 years tracking the milestones of an ordinary woman? Why would he keep records of scholarships, promotions, awards, and apartment leases? And why leave all of it for me to find now? I carefully placed the documents back inside the folder and drove home through afternoon traffic. The address stayed folded in my coat pocket the entire time. By sunset, I had read it so many times that I could recite it from memory. The location belonged to a private office building overlooking Boston Harbor. Not a residence. Not a hotel. An office. Somehow that made the situation feel even stranger. Around 7 o'clock, I finally made a decision. If Lucas wanted me to find the address, then he expected me to use it. The next morning arrived bright and cold. Sunlight reflected across the harbor, as I stood outside the building staring up at glass and steel. The structure looked expensive without being flashy. Elegant. Quietly powerful. The lobby alone was larger than my entire apartment. I almost turned around twice before reaching the reception desk. A woman in a navy suit greeted me with a professional smile. Before I could explain why I was there, she looked down at her computer and nodded. "Miss Parker?" My pulse jumped. "Yes. Mr. Moretti has been expecting you." The answer stole every prepared sentence from my mind. Expecting me. As though this meeting had been scheduled for years. She escorted me toward a private elevator. The ride to the top floor lasted less than a minute, but it felt much longer. My reflection stared back at me from polished metal walls. Nervous. Curious. Completely unprepared. When the elevator doors opened, Sunlight flooded the hallway through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. The city stretched across the horizon beyond them. The receptionist guided me to a pair of wooden doors and stopped. "You may go in." Then she left. I stood alone for several seconds before finally pushing the doors open. The office beyond was surprisingly simple. Large windows. Dark wood furniture. Shelves lined with books. No unnecessary displays of wealth. No oversized desk dominating the room. Just quiet confidence. A man stood near the windows with his back turned toward me. Tall. Dark suit. Hands loosely clasped behind him. I recognized him immediately from the photograph. 7 years had added a few lines around his eyes and sharpened the authority in his posture, but it was unquestionably the same man. Slowly he turned around. Blue eyes met mine across the room. For a moment neither of us spoke. There was no surprise in his expression. No confusion. Only a strange calmness, as though this meeting had been inevitable. Then Lucas Moretti offered a small nod and said the last thing I expected to hear. "You look exactly like your father." For several seconds, I forgot every question I had planned to ask. The office suddenly felt much larger than before. Sunlight reflected across the harbor behind Lucas Moretti, casting silver light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood calmly beside a bookshelf, as though this meeting was the most natural thing in the world. Meanwhile, my heart felt like it was trying to keep pace with 7 years of unanswered questions. "You knew my father," I finally said. Lucas nodded once. "Very well." His voice was lower than I expected. Calm. Measured. The voice of a man accustomed to being listened to. "Then why did I never hear your name?" A shadow of something crossed his expression. Not anger. Not sadness. Something more complicated. "Because your father asked me not to be part of your life." The answer hit me harder than I expected. I stared at him. "That makes no sense." It made perfect sense to him. Lucas walked slowly toward his desk and opened a small wooden box resting near the corner. From inside, he removed an old photograph. Different from the one I had found, but taken around the same time. He placed it carefully on the desk between us. My father was in it again. Younger. Smiling. Standing beside Lucas near what looked like a fishing dock. They looked like lifelong friends. "Your father believes some worlds should remain separate," Lucas said quietly. I looked from the photograph back to him. "And yours was one of those worlds." For the first time, Lucas gave the smallest hint of a smile. "Something like that." Silence settled between us. The city stretched beyond the windows. Boats moved across the harbor. Traffic flowed through distant streets. Everything outside continued normally while my understanding of the past shifted with every sentence. I thought about the folder in the storage unit. The scholarships. The internships. The records. "You kept files on me." Lucas did not deny it. "Yes." "For 7 years." "Yes." The honesty somehow made it harder to process. Most people would have tried to soften it. Explain it differently. Lucas simply accepted the truth. "Why?" I asked. The question left my mouth before I could stop it. "Why would you do that?" Lucas looked toward the harbor for several moments before answering. "Because I made a promise." The same phrase from the folder. My pulse quickened. "To my father?" Lucas nodded. "The day before he died." The room suddenly felt very quiet. Every sound seemed distant. Every movement slowed. "What kind of promise?" Lucas exhaled slowly. "He asked me to make sure you had every opportunity he would have given you himself." I stared at him. "That is impossible." "I know." His eyes returned to mine. "I told him that at the time." The sunlight shifted slightly across the floor. Somewhere outside, a ship horn echoed faintly across the water. Lucas rested one hand against the edge of his desk. "Your father understood he would not be there to watch you graduate. He would not be there for your first apartment. Your first promotion. The difficult years." His voice remained steady, but something in it carried the weight of memory. He wanted someone to make sure doors stayed open when they needed to. My throat tightened unexpectedly. I thought about every impossible moment that had somehow worked out. Every last-minute opportunity. Every lucky break. Suddenly they no longer felt random. The scholarship, I whispered. Lucas said nothing. He did not need to. The answer was already there. The internship. Silence again. The apartment lease when I was 22. Lucas lowered his eyes briefly. My chest tightened with every realization. 7 years of coincidences were beginning to look very different. Then I noticed something on the corner of his desk. A familiar blue folder. My name was printed across the front. And it looked thick enough to hold the story of an entire life. My eyes remained fixed on the blue folder. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The harbor outside the windows. The sunlight reflecting across the glass. The expensive office. None of it mattered. Only that folder. 7 years of my life sat a few feet away from me, organized neatly beneath my own name. Lucas followed my gaze but made no move toward it. He simply waited. The silence between us felt intentional. Respectful. As if he understood that some truths needed time before they could be touched. Finally, I looked up. May I see it? Lucas nodded once. It belongs to you now. The words sent an unexpected chill through me. Belongs to you now. Slowly, I crossed the office and placed my hand on the folder. It felt surprisingly ordinary. Just paper and cardboard. Yet somehow heavier than anything I had ever carried. I opened it carefully. The first page contained a simple date. 7 years earlier. The same month my father died. Beneath it was a short handwritten note. Scholarship application submitted. Additional funding secured. Student will not be informed. My breath caught. I turned another page. Internship opportunity confirmed. Recommendation delivered anonymously. Student will not be informed. Another page. Housing assistance approved. Lease issue resolved. Student will not be informed. The same phrase appeared again and again. Student will not be informed. I felt my throat tighten. Every page revealed another moment I had considered luck. Every page transformed coincidence into intention. I continued turning pages. Awards. Career opportunities. Financial assistance during difficult periods. Small interventions that never controlled my life but quietly protected my future. Lucas had not built my success for me. He had simply removed obstacles when they threatened to become impossible. That distinction mattered. It mattered more than I could explain. Eventually I reached a page that stopped me completely. The document was dated 3 years earlier. I remembered that year well. My mother had become seriously ill. Medical bills had piled up faster than I could manage. Somehow an anonymous donor had covered a portion of the treatment costs. The hospital never revealed the person's identity. I looked at the page. There was no donor name there either. Only a brief note. Family stability preserved. Promise maintained. My vision blurred slightly. I closed the folder and took a slow breath. You paid those bills. Lucas remained silent for several seconds. Then he answered. Your mother deserved more time without financial fear. The simplicity of the response somehow made it more emotional. He was not seeking gratitude. He was not defending himself. He was simply stating a fact. I walked toward the windows and stared out at the harbor. Boats moved across the water beneath bright afternoon sunlight. People hurried along sidewalks far below. Ordinary lives continuing as normal. Meanwhile, my entire understanding of the past had shifted. Why tell me now? I asked quietly. Lucas joined me near the window. Because the promise was never meant to last forever. I turned toward him. His expression remained calm, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something heavier. More personal. There is another reason, he said. My pulse quickened. What reason? Lucas hesitated for the first time since I arrived. Then he looked directly at me. Someone recently started asking questions about you. The warmth of the afternoon suddenly felt colder. What kind of questions? Lucas's jaw tightened slightly. The kind that forced me to step out of the shadows. The words settled heavily between us. Step out of the shadows. Until that moment, the story had belonged to the past. Old photographs. Forgotten promises. Quiet acts of protection hidden behind years of coincidence. Suddenly it felt present. Immediate. Real. I turned away from the harbor and faced Lucas completely. Who is asking questions about me? Lucas remained calm, but I noticed a subtle change in his posture. The same confidence was there. The same control. Yet now I could see something else beneath it. Concern. Not for himself. For me. At the moment, I do not believe you are in danger, he said carefully. Then why tell me? His eyes held mine. Because you deserve the truth. The answer disarmed me. For 7 years, decisions about my life had been made without my knowledge. Yet now he was standing here giving me information I might not want to hear simply because he believed it belonged to me. That mattered. More than I expected. Lucas walked slowly toward the desk and picked up a thin file separate from the blue folder. He opened it briefly before setting it down again. 3 weeks ago, someone began reviewing old records connected to your father. My stomach tightened immediately. Why? That is what I am trying to determine. The office suddenly felt quieter. Outside, sunlight reflected across the harbor in bright flashes of silver. Inside, every word seemed amplified. Does this have something to do with you? I asked. Lucas considered the question. Possibly. The honesty surprised me again. Most powerful people avoided uncertainty. Lucas did not. My relationship with your father was not widely known, he continued. Someone recently became interested in that connection. I folded my arms and stared at the floor for a moment. The polished wood reflected thin lines of afternoon light. You still have not told me how you knew him. For the first time since I arrived, Lucas smiled. Not a public smile. Not a practiced one. A real one. Small and brief. I was wondering how long it would take before you asked that. I felt a slight warmth reach my cheeks. I have had a busy morning. That earned the faintest trace of amusement in his eyes. Then the expression faded. He walked toward a bookshelf and removed an old leather-bound journal. The cover showed years of wear. He handed it to me carefully. Your father gave me this. I opened it slowly. Inside were handwritten entries. Notes. Observations. Reflections. Some were personal. Others described fishing trips, road trips, and conversations. Pages filled with moments from a friendship I never knew existed. Then I reached an entry dated 8 years earlier. The handwriting belonged to my father. I recognized it instantly. The words blurred for a moment as emotion tightened my throat. Take care of your family before your business. Success means nothing if you forget the people who matter. I looked up. Lucas was watching me quietly. He used to say that often? I asked. Lucas nodded. Almost every week. A strange silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Reflective. For the first time, I began seeing something I had missed before. This was never just about a promise. It was never just about debt or obligation. My father had mattered to Lucas. Deeply. The realization changed everything. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. The sudden sound broke the moment. I glanced at the screen and immediately frowned. The caller identification showed an unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice spoke only one sentence before the line disconnected. Tell Mr. Moretti that some promises cost more than he remembers. The call ended. And when I looked up at Lucas, I realized he already knew something had just gone very wrong. The office seemed impossibly still after the call ended. I lowered the phone slowly and stared at the dark screen. My heartbeat had become the loudest sound in the room. Across from me, Lucas watched without speaking. He did not ask what the caller said. Somehow, he already knew it mattered. The sunlight that had filled the office all afternoon now stretched longer across the floor as the day moved toward evening. Finally, I lifted my eyes. The caller said something about a promise. A subtle change crossed Lucas's face. Not fear. Recognition. What exactly? I repeated the sentence word for word. The moment I finished, silence settled between us. Lucas walked toward the windows overlooking the harbor. For several seconds he stood there with his hands resting lightly in his pockets, looking out at the water, thinking. I suddenly realized this might be the first time all day that he did not have an immediate answer. You know who it is, I said quietly. He exhaled slowly. I know who it could be. The distinction mattered. I could hear it in his voice. Then tell me. Lucas remained silent for another moment before turning back toward me. The late afternoon light softened the sharp lines of his face. For the first time since entering the office, he looked tired. Not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying old memories for too many years. Your father and I met long before either of us had much money, he said. We were very different men, but somehow we became friends. I listened carefully. A few years later, our lives moved in different directions. He built a family. I built businesses. Yet we remained close. His eyes drifted briefly toward the journal still resting on the desk. There were people who disagreed with some of the decisions I made during those years. People who believed I owed them loyalty forever. I understood immediately. He was talking about the past without naming it directly. Keeping the story safe. Careful. Controlled. And one of those people is asking questions now? Lucas nodded. Possibly. The answer unsettled me more than certainty would have. Outside, boats moved slowly through the harbor beneath fading sunlight. Inside, my thoughts moved back through every page in the blue folder. Every scholarship. Every opportunity. Every invisible act of protection. Suddenly another question appeared. One I should have asked earlier. Why did my father trust you? Lucas looked genuinely surprised. Then something softened in his expression. Because he knew me before the world did. The answer lingered between us. Before the world did. Before wealth. Before influence. Before reputation. My father had known the man, not the legend. The realization felt strangely comforting. I looked down at the folder again. 7 years of records. 7 years of promises kept. Then I noticed a section I had not opened yet. A tab near the back marked private. Lucas followed my gaze. You should read that. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were several sealed envelopes arranged by date. The oldest one sat at the bottom. Written across the front in my father's handwriting were 5 simple words. For Emily, when she is ready. My breath caught immediately. The room disappeared again. The harbor. The office. The fading sunlight. Everything narrowed to that envelope. Slowly, carefully, I broke the seal. And when I unfolded the letter inside, the first sentence changed everything I thought I knew about my father and Lucas Moretti. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the letter. The paper was old but carefully preserved, as though someone had understood how important this moment would become. Across the top of the page was my father's handwriting. Familiar. Steady. Instantly recognizable. Dear Emily, if you are reading this, then there is a good chance I am no longer there to explain any of this myself. The words blurred for a moment as emotion tightened my throat. I swallowed hard and continued reading. There are many things a father hopes to do for his daughter. Watch her grow. Watch her succeed. Watch her become stronger than she believes she can be. I wanted all of those things. Life simply had other plans. I paused and took a slow breath. The office remained silent around me. Lucas stood several feet away, giving me the privacy to finish. I returned to the letter. Years ago, I met a man named Lucas Moretti when neither of us had much. The world will tell many stories about him. Some true. Some false. What matters is this. When I needed a friend, he was one. When I needed loyalty, he gave it. And when I learned I might not have enough time left with you, he made me a promise. Tears gathered in my eyes. I kept reading. If you ever discover what he has done for you, understand something important. I never asked him to control your life. I asked him to protect your opportunities. There is a difference. Every success must still belong to you. Every dream must still be earned by you. If doors open, you must be the one brave enough to walk through them. I lowered the page briefly. Suddenly everything made sense. The scholarships. The internships. The second chances. None of them had guaranteed success. They had only given me the chance to succeed. The rest had been my responsibility. I looked toward Lucas. He met my eyes but said nothing. The letter continued. If you are reading this, then you are already stronger than you know. And if Lucas kept his promise, then I hope one day you thank him for something more important than helping you. I hope you thank him for reminding you that you were never alone. By the time I reached the final line, tears were quietly running down my cheeks. The last sentence was short. Trust your future, Emily. It is waiting for you. I carefully folded the letter and held it against my chest. The harbor outside glowed gold beneath the setting sun. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then I walked across the office and stopped in front of Lucas. 7 years? I said softly. He nodded. 7 years? I shook my head in disbelief. Why did you never tell me? A faint smile appeared on his face. Because the promise was about you, not me. The answer struck deeper than anything else he had said. Not me. You. For 7 years, I had believed luck kept finding me. I thought chance had carried me through impossible moments. The truth was much stranger. A promise had followed me through every difficult year. A promise made by one friend to another. A promise kept without applause, recognition, or reward. As the sun disappeared beyond the harbor, I realized something else. My father had given me one final gift. Not money. Not instructions. Not protection. He had given me proof that loyalty still existed in the world. And standing beside the window, watching the last light fade across the water, was the man who had spent 7 years proving it.